So guys, I bought a Subaru and you'll never ever guess what happened. It's behind me right now and it isn't running. It ran big end bearings, which is obviously a super common problem with the Subaru EJ series engines. There are a lot of theories and different reasons why that happens, but it happened to me, unfortunately. I bought this car only a couple of months ago and I bought it with the intention of having a bit of fun with it, driving it around for summer and then on selling it. I can tell you that I definitely had a little bit of fun in it and I took it to a track day, but it blew up before I even got to drive it for summer, so I am pretty disappointed. If we look under the bonnet, there isn't a lot going on in there right now. It's obviously pretty damn empty. I pulled it out and I stripped it and I have found a whole lot of damage inside the engine. Fortunately I got it early, so it isn't super bad, but it still does need a whole lot of new bits and pieces. I'm down here in the engine room at Possumborn Motorsport. I just want to say a huge thanks to the guys here for letting me use their facilities to pull my engine out and inspect it, and I'm now in the process of rebuilding it, as you can see. This is it as we stand at the moment. It is almost done into short block form. I've also rebuilt the heads and flushed out all of the oil passages. It's super important to do that sort of thing after it's run bearings, because there is so much debris that goes everywhere and you obviously don't want that staying in the motor when you start it up the next time. Otherwise that material will go back through the bearings and they'll shred them to pieces for a second time around. I can tell you plenty of people have done that in the past. So let's see the damage. It damages more than just the bearing itself. The conrod bearing runs on the crankshaft. On my particular engine, the bearing that failed was the bearing in conrod number 2. A visual inspection does show you that the crankshaft is a little bit scuffed up on that particular journal, but the main way that you can tell it has been damaged is by using a micrometer to measure it and finding that it's undersized. Unfortunately, there was no way that that was going to be reusable. Next up on the list of failures was the main bearings, the big end bearings, the bearings that failed in this instance. However, when they fail, they put a massive amount of material and debris through the rest of the engine, and that debris typically finds itself embedded in the other bearings in the engine, like the main. Because I caught it quite early, they weren't as bad as what you might expect to see. However, this particular bearing did have a large score on it, most likely caused by these bearing materials. The last major component that was damaged is the oil pump. Now the oil pump is obviously responsible for moving oil around the engine. So we're just going to pull the back off the oil pump to be able to have a look at the gears inside. These are the vanes that push the oil around. Let's look at the main part that has failed, which is the engine bearing. Looking at the bearings, you can tell pretty badly they've worn through the top layers of material that are designed to be a little bit softer than the hard shell at the bottom of the bearing. Another important component that I will not be putting back onto the engine because it is kind of damaged in a way is the factory oil cooler. Oh, it's leaking stuff everywhere. The factory oil cooler is basically like a miniature radiator or heat exchanger, and it has tiny little passages inside it that are awesome at catching all the little fragments of bearing material and debris that are running through the oiling system. If I was to put this oil cooler back on the engine, then it is most likely new oil pressure would come through the engine and take all of that debris back into the bearings, and I would be back at square one with a run bearing. You may also hear this referred to as rod knock, and that is because you can hear the rods knocking. Essentially the bearings wear down significantly and then the rods can knock back and forth on the crank. So I'm bang in the middle of getting my short block completely rebuilt and everything cleaned absolutely perfectly. I am going to chuck up a few videos of me rebuilding this engine, nothing too in depth, but just to give you guys a bit of an idea of what I'm doing to it and getting it up and running again. I'll chuck a link in the description so you guys can check that out. It is my recommendation, if you're going to buy a Subaru or you own one, to know exactly what is going on with your engine. Now this means regular leak down tests, obviously having it serviced and well maintained, a checkup on the dyno by a reputable tuner to make sure everything is running safely is a great idea. I also highly recommend cutting open your oil filters when doing an oil change. You may be able to find any bearing material particles before it becomes an issue and you can get that rectified. It is unfortunately an inherent design issue of the Subaru engine and it comes with mileage and abuse. So be prepared that owning a Subaru can be so much fun, but it can be quite costly if you need to go down the track of an engine rebuild, like I have had to. Why shouldn't you buy a Subaru?
Because they're always running fucking bearings.